My name is Margaret, and I am 66 years old. If you were to look at me now, you might see a grandmother enjoying her golden years. But the truth is very different. For the past 10 years, my life has not been my own. I have been raising my son's children, 4 little ones, who became my entire world because no one else stepped up. What began as a temporary promise slowly turned into my permanent reality. I had dreams once. I imagined traveling after retirement. Maybe finding time to paint again, or even just enjoy a quiet morning without being rushed. Instead, my days blurred into routines of school drop-offs, packing lunches, endless laundry, and late-night fevers. While my friends talked about cruises and hobbies, I was wiping noses and reading bedtime stories. I love my grandchildren deeply, but loving them has come at the cost of losing myself. People often tell me I'm strong. Maybe I am. But strength feels different when it isn't chosen, when it's demanded day after day. There were mornings I would sit at the kitchen table with my coffee, staring out the window, wondering if this was all my life would ever be. The years slipped by, and with each one, I pushed my own needs further into the background. And then came that dinner. It was just a normal evening, the table set, the kids laughing, me quietly cleaning up behind everyone. But in the middle of it all, my son and his wife made an announcement that made my heart sink so fast I could barely breathe. In that moment, I knew my life was about to change again, only this time, not in the way they expected. Most mornings of the past 10 years have started the same way for me, long before the sun is fully up. I hear little feet padding down the hallway, or the sound of someone crying out because of a bad dream. I shuffle into the kitchen, start the coffee, and begin packing lunches before I've even had a sip. The house is never quiet. Not really. By 6:30, I'm helping with homework that should have been finished the night before, finding a missing shoe, or calming a tantrum. I love my grandchildren. That part is undeniable. There's a sweetness in the way one of them curls into me when she's tired, or the pride I feel when another reads a book out loud, stumbling but determined. These moments have kept me going. But love doesn't erase exhaustion. Love doesn't make up for the way my own life disappeared in the process. Before all this, I had a walking club that met every Saturday morning. 10 years ago. I told them I'd miss just a week or two. That week became months, then years, and eventually, I wasn't even on the group text anymore. My quilting group was the same. I still have a stack of beautiful fabric folded neatly in a basket, untouched, waiting for me. And the books I can't even count how many sit unread on my nightstand. Every night, I'd tell myself I'd start one after the kids went to bed. But by then, my body was too heavy with fatigue. My days became a rhythm of obligations. School runs, grocery shopping, folding endless piles of laundry, wiping counters, sweeping floors. I didn't mind it at first. It felt like I was helping in a time of need. But 10 years later, it was no longer help. It was my entire existence. Sometimes I would catch myself staring into the mirror and hardly recognizing the woman looking back. I wasn't Margaret anymore. I was simply Grandma, the one who held everything together, the one who filled in all the cracks. My identity, my dreams of traveling, painting, even just resting had all been pushed aside to make room for everyone else. Evenings followed the same exhausting pattern. Dinner, dishes, baths, bedtime stories, another round of laundry. By the time I finally sat down with my coffee cup reheated for the 3rd time, I realized whole days had slipped by without me thinking once about my own needs. There's a strange kind of quiet injustice in it. People would tell me I was lucky to be so close to my grandchildren. And I am lucky, in some ways, but they don't see the cost. They don't see the loneliness that creeps in when your entire purpose is wrapped around others and there's no space left for yourself. Looking back, I can see how I let the years roll over me, one after another, until a decade was gone. My sacrifices became invisible, expected, even assumed. And I told myself it was okay that this was what love looked like. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. All of this set the stage for that dinner. The night where, between bites of food and clinking glasses, my son and his wife made an announcement that stopped me cold. I felt the weight of those 10 years press even harder on my chest. And for the first time, I wondered if I had the strength to keep going. The night of that dinner is burned into my memory. I remember stepping into my son's house, surprised to see the table set with more care than usual. The roast chicken was steaming, the green beans glistened with butter, and a cake sat waiting on the counter. For a moment, I let myself believe this was their way of saying thank you. Maybe they had finally noticed the years I had poured into their home, the nights I stayed up with sick kids, the mornings I made sure no one missed the bus. I thought perhaps they wanted to honor me. The kids were lively, as always. Ava tried to keep her brothers in line. Mason tapped his fork against the plate. Theo whispered jokes that made Lily giggle until milk nearly spilled from her nose. Watching them, I felt that familiar tug in my heart, the pride of being part of their lives, of seeing them grow. I had been there for every scraped knee, every spelling bee, every bedtime story. In many ways, they felt like my own. But under that pride, I carried the weight of exhaustion. My back ached from endless laundry. My hands cracked from washing dishes. My life, once filled with quilting nights and walking clubs, had shrunk into this never-ending routine of caregiving. And still, I held on to a flicker of hope that tonight might bring recognition. Then it happened. My son cleared his throat. His wife placed her hand on her stomach, and they shared their big news: another baby was on the way. The room erupted. The children cheered, voices overlapping with questions about whether it would be a boy or a girl. My son's face glowed with pride. His wife smiled with the radiant certainty of motherhood. The house filled with joy, but inside me, something cracked. I kept my smile fixed, nodding as if I shared their excitement. But my heart sank like a stone. A fifth baby. Another round of diapers, bottles, sleepless nights. Another decade, maybe, of putting myself last. I had already given up so much: my hobbies, my friends, my quiet mornings. I felt trapped in a cycle that never seemed to end. I wanted to clap with the children, to share in their happiness. But all I felt was a knot tightening in my stomach. I thought of the fabric gathering dust in its basket, the stack of books untouched on my nightstand, the trips I once dreamed of taking. Each dream had been swallowed by responsibility, and now the burden threatened to grow even heavier. As the children laughed and made plans for their new sibling, I stared at the table. The steam from the roast blurred my vision, though it wasn't the food making my eyes burn. I realized in that moment that no one saw me, not really. To them, I was part of the furniture, the reliable presence who would keep everything together no matter what. That dinner, which I had imagined as a gesture of gratitude, became the night that broke something in me. The joy in their faces contrasted so sharply with the dread in my chest that I felt like I was living in a different world altogether. I stayed silent, swallowing my feelings because I didn't want to ruin their celebration. But deep inside, I knew this was a turning point. If I kept on the same path, I would lose myself completely. And as I drove home later that evening, the echoes of their laughter still ringing in my ears, I braced myself. I didn't know then how quickly the weight would grow heavier, or how cruel the next request would be. It was only a few days after that dinner when the ground shifted beneath me again. My son asked me to stay a little longer after the kids had gone to bed. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, the hum of the dishwasher in the background, the house finally quiet after another chaotic day. I thought maybe he wanted to thank me, or at least acknowledge the years I had carried the weight of his home. Instead, what I heard felt like a knife sliding between my ribs. They wanted me to make it official, not just helping here and there, not just filling in when they were exhausted from work. They wanted me to become the full-time caregiver. School runs, meals, laundry, every bit of it. As if I hadn't already been doing that for 10 years. But then came the part that stole my breath. They wanted me to contribute to the rent and groceries too. I sat there, stunned. My pension barely covered my small house, my medication, my own bills. And still, over the years, I had bought the kids' shoes when theirs wore thin, slipped extra boxes of cereal into my cart, covered school trips without saying a word. Had none of that counted? Did they really see me as a tenant in their house? Someone eating their food, taking up their space rather than the person who had raised their children when they could not? I nodded slowly, but inside, my heart was cracking. Fair. That was the word they used. Was it fair that my hands were raw from dishes? My back ached from lifting. My nights were restless with the cries of children that weren't mine to raise. Was it fair that my savings had been drained, my own dreams shelved, all to keep their world from falling apart? The next morning, the weight of it all clung to me like a heavy coat. I moved through the usual motions, packing lunches, ironing shirts, scrubbing counters, but something inside me was breaking. I wasn't just tired. I felt invisible, reduced to nothing more than free labor. That evening, when I finally returned to my own house, I found my neighbor Ruthie sitting on her porch swing with a glass of iced tea. She waved me over, and without thinking, I joined her. The cool air brushed my face, and before I knew it, the words spilled out. I told her everything about the new baby, the endless chores, the request for rent money, the way I felt like a housekeeper who worked for free. She listened quietly, her face calm, her eyes steady. When I finally stopped, she shook her head and said something that landed deep in my chest. I had already raised my children. It wasn't my job to raise theirs. Those words echoed in me long after I went back inside. I had whispered them to myself in fleeting moments of weakness, but hearing them spoken out loud made them real. For the first time, I let myself wonder what life could look like if I stopped carrying everyone else's load. That night, as I lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling and felt something shift. The betrayal still burned, but mixed with the pain was the faintest flicker of resolve. Maybe I couldn't change the past 10 years, but perhaps I still had a chance to reclaim what little time remained for me. It was only the seed of an idea then, fragile and small, but once planted, it began to grow. After that conversation with Ruthie, something inside me began to shift. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to imagine a different kind of life. I told my son I had errands to run, but instead, I drove to the library. Sitting at a computer in the corner, I typed apartments near me, Dozens of listings popped up, most of them far beyond what I could afford. Still, tucked in between were a few income-based options, small places. Nothing fancy, but places that could be mine. I wrote down phone numbers and addresses in a little notebook I carried. Just the act of writing them down felt like planting a seed. For years, my world had been narrowed to their kitchen, their laundry piles, their chaos. Now, I pictured myself turning a key to a door that belonged to me. A space where I could leave a book half read on the nightstand and know it would still be there when I returned. A space where silence didn't mean something was wrong, but simply peace. It was only a dream at first, fragile and tentative. But as I went about the routines, packing sandwiches, folding shirts, scrubbing dishes, the idea of freedom kept flickering in the back of my mind. And then, just as that fragile hope was taking root, came the blow that nearly shattered me. I walked into the house one evening to find an envelope on the counter and my son's face tight with suspicion. $300 had gone missing, and the unspoken accusation hung in the air. My daughter-in-law's eyes cut into me as if I were a thief in my own family. My throat closed. After all the shoes I had bought, the school trips I had paid for, the countless groceries slipped into their pantry. Now they believed I had stolen from them. The pain of it hit harder than words can explain. It wasn't just about the money. It was about trust. It was about being reduced, after a decade of sacrifice, to someone they saw as capable of betrayal. In that moment, I realized something with terrifying clarity. I had given them everything I could, and it would never be enough. Not for them. I walked out of that house with my heart pounding. Back at my place, I pulled a suitcase from the closet. At first, I only placed small things inside a framed photo of my husband and me on our wedding day. My quilting needles, a Bible that had belonged to my mother, little pieces of myself, reminders of who I was before I became everybody else's safety net. Each item I tucked into that suitcase was like a quiet declaration this time. I was choosing me. A week later, I signed the lease on a one-bedroom apartment at the edge of town. It wasn't much, just a tiny kitchen, a narrow living room, and a balcony big enough for 2 pots of flowers. But when I turned the key in the lock, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, ownership of my own life. I filled the space with thrift store furniture, mismatched but mine. On the table, I set my husband's photo, and in the corner, my quilting bag waited patiently. At night, the silence felt heavy at first, but soon it became comforting. No children crying, no laundry piles waiting. Just me, a cup of tea, and stillness. The betrayal of being accused still burned, but that pain carried me to a truth I could no longer deny. I wasn't their maid. I wasn't their safety net. I was a woman who still had time left, and I was determined to live it on my terms. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in my gut told me to answer. My son's voice was tight, frantic. His wife was in the hospital with complications, bed rest, maybe for weeks. The kids were falling apart, and he didn't know what to do. For a long moment, I just sat there. The phone pressed to my ear, my heart pounding. After everything, the accusations, the years of sacrifice, the suitcase by my bed, I had sworn I would never go back. Part of me wanted to hang up, to let him face the chaos himself. But then I pictured Ava trying to keep order, Mason scrambling for clean clothes, Theo scavenging for snacks, and little Lily clinging to anyone who would hold her. My chest ached. So I said yes, but this time, it would be different. I promised to help, but only on my terms. No moving back in. No carrying every burden alone. I would come after school. I would cook simple meals, and I would keep the kids steady. But when the sun set, I would drive back to my own apartment, lock my own door, and sleep in my own bed. The first week was rough. The house looked like a storm had swept through it, dishes stacked, laundry overflowing, toys scattered everywhere. But instead of slipping back into autopilot, I took a deep breath and called the kids together. I told them this time, it had to be a team effort. It wasn't easy. Ava groaned when I handed her a history project and reminded her she was capable of finishing it. Mason sulked when I showed him how to load the washer, muttering that it wasn't fair. Theo rolled his eyes at setting the table, and Lily pouted when I asked her to put crayons back in their box. But slowly, I watched something remarkable happen. One night, Ava stood beside me at the stove. I cracked the first egg into the pan, then handed her the second. She wrinkled her nose but tapped the shell carefully. When it slid into the skillet without breaking, her face lit up with pride. Another evening, Mason pulled clean shirts out of the dryer, folding them clumsily but smiling when he realized he had done it himself. Theo began treating the table like his own art project, lining up forks and napkins just so. Even Lily, small as she was, started tucking her toys away without being asked. It wasn't perfect. Eggs were burned, laundry folded unevenly, chores forgotten here and there. But it wasn't about perfection. It was about them stepping into roles they had never been asked to take before. For the first time, I wasn't holding the entire weight alone. I was showing them how to stand on their own 2 feet. By the time autumn rolled around, the baby was born. A boy, tiny but healthy. I visited the hospital, more for the children than for their parents. I watched Ava cradle her new brother, Mason peeking over her shoulder, Theo balancing on tiptoe, and Lily beaming with wonder. I kissed the baby's forehead, congratulated my son and his wife, and quietly left. When Kelsey came home, the chaos only grew. But I didn't step back into the old role. My 3 months were up, and I kept my word. I still visited. I still loved. I still answered the late-night calls from Ava when she needed advice. But I no longer gave up my life to hold theirs together. I raised my son. It was never my job to raise his children. Love, I realized, is not surrender. Love is balance, and as I watered the flowers on my balcony that evening, I finally felt the peace I had been searching for all along. Looking back now, I almost can't believe how much of myself I gave away without even realizing it. For years, I poured everything into raising my grandchildren. I told myself it was love, that this was what family meant. But somewhere along the way, I forgot that love without boundaries isn't love at all. It's surrender. The hardest part was admitting I was lost. My days were filled with chores, routines, and sacrifices that no one noticed. I kept hoping for gratitude, for a small acknowledgement. Instead, I was met with more demands, and eventually even accusations. That was the breaking point. Painful as it was, it pushed me to finally choose myself. And once I did, everything changed. I found a little apartment of my own. I learned to enjoy the quiet again, the smell of coffee in the morning, the sound of my own footsteps on the balcony, the freedom of closing my door at night. I still love my family deeply, but I've learned that love doesn't mean giving until you have nothing left. Love means showing up in a way that honors both them and me. The lesson I carry, and the one I hope you'll carry too, is simple. Choosing yourself is not selfish. It is survival. It is strength. And it is the only way to love others without losing who you are. If you've ever felt the weight of giving too much, I hope my story reminds you that it's never too late to set yourself free. Thank you for listening to my journey. If this story touched you, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Your voice matters, and maybe, just maybe, it's time to choose yourself too.